Hello, my name is Sanj Surati. I'm a stand-up comedian, public speaker, and frontman for a political punk band. I've been performing on stage for over 25 years, have won many awards, and now consult to help many people learn the important skills they need to get up on stage. Some of my clients are CEOs at huge corporations, looking for the confidence to present in front of thousands of people. And some of my clients are people looking to muster up the courage to get up and do their first ever stand-up show in front of a few friends. I believe that stage presence is an important aspect to any live performance or public speaking. Your delivery and connection with the audience can be the make or break moment for any event. Throughout my professional career, I've been asked, how come I have so much stage presence on stage? And how do I combat nerves? So I've created the Stage Presence Podcast as a tool to help those in need of the ability to bring up the courage to get up on stage. This podcast is split up into 6 parts, and this is part 1. And part 1 is called Connecting with the Audience. Throughout this podcast, I'm going to focus on a few key words that I hope will steer you in your direction in overcoming your fear of being on stage. These words are connect, engage, and inspire. Public speaking is a big aspect of what I do every day. So those of you know me that know that that I do stand-up comedy, that I act, I perform live music, but I also run a digital agency called Tiger Heart. And we work with lots of businesses to help them express their narratives using new and emerging technology. It's really important for me to connect with my customers. And what I love to do is talk about my experiences and my view on where innovation fits within our current era. And talking about that is really important to us because it's kind of a sales aspect of the things that we do. I would go back to those really important 3 words that I mentioned before: connect, engage, and inspire. My job when I'm on stage is to connect with the audience, engage with them, and inspire them so that they can come to me afterwards and say, you know what, I want to work with you. It's the same with comedy. Comedy for me is the hardest, rawest form of public speaking. It's just you, a microphone, and generally speaking, a room full of people that want to be entertained. Public speaking on a business level is a little bit different because the people there are there to listen. While with comedy, they want to be entertained. And if you don't make them laugh, they'll hate you. Initially, I started writing music, and then I started to perform music live. And then I started to enjoy performing live for loads of reasons. It was exhilarating, it was exciting, but most of all, it was just a great feeling to see people love what you do on stage. Public speaking is a similar kind of entity. You're there talking to people, engaging with people. And then with comedy, stand-up comedy, is probably the most challenging form of public speaking I've ever done in my life. It's raw. It's just you, a microphone, and the opportunity to engage with an audience that's quite hard to make laugh. I believe if you can make someone laugh as a comedian on stage, you can do anything. I performed in front of different types of audiences, and every show I've done in comedy has been completely different. Every audience has a different kind of feeling to it. Every venue I performed in it is very different. Even when it's the same venue but has a different crowd in it, it just feels completely different. And what I love about stand-up comedy is that it kind of keeps you on your toes. One of the reasons I moved into stand-up comedy was because the adrenaline that used to build up in me when I used to perform live started to disappear. I got to a point in the live music sector where I wasn't nervous anymore. I'll touch on nerves in another podcast. Some of the audiences that I've done within the comedy sphere have been huge. I've done sold out shows to about 500 people, but some of the comedy shows I've done have been to about 10 people. And maybe 70% of that crowd are comedians. And performing as a comedian in front of comedians is tough because comedians, specifically in the London sector, are quite jaded, are quite bitter. very competitive, and you're on stage and you have to do your thing. And if you don't connect with them, they're not going to laugh, which means if they're not going to laugh, you're not a funny comedian. For me, doing stand-up comedy has been a really, really hard challenge, which I've loved. You know, you could look at a crowd and go, look, this is a warm crowd. I'm going to smash this. But you still need to think about how you're going to connect with them. It's so important. It's probably the most important aspect of your performance. If you don't connect with them, you're not going to engage with them. And if you don't engage with them, you're not going to have the ability to inspire them. Connection with the audience is a huge factor in determining whether a show is going to be a success or not. Now more than ever, everyone's time is a commodity. People really value their time. So you need to respect that. The first thing I would say about connecting with an audience is throw away your ego. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how long you've been doing what you do. You may have won the best award ever, but value that person in front of you. Your audience is the most important person in the room. The audience has given you their time for you. You need to value that, appreciate that. It doesn't matter how many people are there, they've given you their time. If you don't connect with them, you're wasting your time. Understanding that will give you a sense of a goal. Now more than ever, everyone's life is busy. Everyone's doing things. And if you want something from an audience, you need to really value their time, their eyes, their ears, their laughs. You're engaging with them and you're connecting with them, and they are the reason that you're on stage. So value that. Engaging with an audience initially is really important because it can dictate how the rest of the performance or your public speech is going to carry on. You want to kind of grasp their attention quite early, and you want to be able to nurture that attention so that if there are any drops in the middle of the speech or towards the end of the performance, you've kind of captured them so that they'll listen. You need to really respect the audience. And respecting the audience will show in your performance, whether you're on stage presenting to people or whether you're trying to sell something through your presentation. I believe that you can connect with the audience by engaging with them. In comedy, corporate, or live music, I try to open by commanding the audience attention. Ask the audience how they are. In comedy, I try to open with a joke that appeals to a wide range of people. In a presentation, I try to open with a statement that makes the audience listen and think. And in music, I try to engage by putting in as much energy as possible. Comedy's difficult because it's just you and a microphone, and the audience, especially within an open mic setting, are quite hard to overcome. In a presentation, you've already negotiated what it is that you'll be presenting to them, but you have to kind of engage with them quickly to earn their trust. It's also important to understand that no two audiences are the same. You know, there'll be some audiences that are very open to you because of the way you look or because of the notion of whatever it is that you give off. But there are also audiences that just are not interested in what you have to say. For you to kind of make sure that the performance or whatever it is that you're talking about is going to be as seamless as possible and a beautiful experience, you need to engage with them. You need to kind of lock them down. I try to inspire them. So there are many rewards that will come to you if you can connect with an audience. The first one is that you'll convey the intent of the message that you have planned. The other is that they will acknowledge your work. Someone coming up to you after your performance or presentation and acknowledging your work is a really powerful thing. That means that they've connected with you. The other reward is that they will speak to their peers. I remember once when I was in my band Anonymous Tip, we were touring around the UK. Some of the shows had huge audiences and some of them had small audiences. And a majority of the people that we performed to had never heard us before. I remember one show we did in Leamington Spa. We were the headlining act. And the bands that went on before us were local bands and they brought their crowds. And the venue was packed. And the bands performed and they were terrible, but the fans really liked them because they knew them. And then by the time we got up on stage, there wasn't many people there. There was about 11 people left. However, we still performed, and we performed as best as we could. And everyone in that room after our performance came up to us and acknowledged that they liked what we were doing. And everyone bought a CD. And we could have basically looked at that crowd and thought, you know what, we're not going to do this because no one's there. But we didn't. We carried on. And we managed to sell our record to all of those people. And they all loved us. And a few people told us we were better than the other bands. Now, I know that might sound a bit weird, but that just kind of made us really proud of what we were doing. So it's important to, really value your audience, no matter how many people are there, no matter who's there. Sometimes there are problems. Sometimes you just can't connect and you just have to move on and just get through the show. If you're a stand-up comedian, that usually happens a lot. You could not really start well with your first opening line, but you can't let that ruin the rest of your performance. You have to keep going and try to connect and try and feel the crowd. Try to kind of understand how your audience is being. No two audiences are the same. So something that might work on one audience might not work on another audience. If something doesn't work with an audience, that doesn't mean that it's not going to work for another audience. Try it again. See if it's going to work with them. Being on stage is fantastic. And having so many people or so few people looking at you is a gift. It's an opportunity. So value that person in front of you. I've done so many comedy shows where a comedian has written a really fantastic piece of comedy writing, but they've performed it so that they're just reading from a script. They're not really performing to the audience. They're just trying to get from A to B as quickly as possible. And the problem with that is you're not really thinking about how the audience is reacting to your performance. Now, in comedy, this can be a real problem because the audience is part of the show. Their reaction is what makes the show. So when you're going through your comedy routine, you want to kind of hear or feel how the audience is reacting to your content. And when you feel the kind of moment where they're about to laugh or engage in some way, go with it and be prepared to improvise around it. I've done comedy shows where a comedian's going through their joke and someone may laugh early because they can feel where the joke's going. And that can throw a comedian. And it shouldn't. The comedian should know how to engage with the audience member at that moment and everything in between. The same goes with presentation, when you're a live speaker. I've seen so many presentations where the speaker is just using their PowerPoint slides to guide the audience through their presentation. And that's important, but sometimes those speakers put paragraphs and paragraphs of text onto their slides. And the first thing about a presentation on that level that every presenter needs to understand is that no one is going to read that text and no one's going to be inspired. The famous term, death by PowerPoint. Whenever I do public speaking and whenever I'm using slides, I just use an image and maybe just one sentence. And my aim with that sentence is to inspire the audience. Again, going back to those 3 words that I mentioned to you before: connect, engage, inspire. If you're presenting something, I would suggest inspiring the audience initially, talking them through whatever it is that you're trying to communicate, and then end with something that you feel is going to last with them. With public speaking, the audience are looking at you and listening to you. They're not there to read something that's on the board or on the screen. Throw all your text away. Don't put paragraphs and paragraphs of information on there. The idea of you speaking about something, it's about you connecting with them so that you can follow up with a personal approach later on. There's so many public speakers out there who assume that A document filled with text is going to communicate what it is that they want to communicate. And I understand it. You have a product or a service or something, and you want to kind of put as much information as possible in there so you can convey it to them. But no one's reading your PowerPoint. People are reading you, and you're the thing that needs to communicate. Connecting with the audience is about using simple terminology that can convey whatever it is that you want to convey in a short and concise way. When I'm doing stand-up comedy, I have a few jokes that I try to sort of bring in quite early that I know are going to connect with the audience quite quickly. Some of the jokes that I use always work, and some of the jokes I use sometimes don't work. I try to save the newer material, the things that I'm trying out, for the middle of my set or towards the end of the set before I do my final big gag. But remember, the audience is the most important entity in the room. You're there to entertain them. If you've got something to say, if it's important to you, you have to value their time and the way they're going to listen to you. And also, don't worry about how the audience reacts to what you're doing. You could be performing on stage and there could be someone in the crowd that's yawning or maybe looking away or whispering in someone's ear. Don't worry about that. That doesn't mean they're not connecting with you. That just means that their minds are going in all different directions. Humans are very complicated things. You connecting with them is just an aspect of what they're doing. You really need to inspire your audience. Show them something and then engage with them about that something. If you're trying to sell something, if you're trying to make someone laugh, or if you're just trying to perform in front of them, you need to inspire them. Before I got up on stage, I always think about the audience. I kind of look at the audience. I try to sort of feel how the audience is going to react. And it's not easy, especially when you start off as a stand-up comedian or a public speaker. But as you start to do more and more events, you start to kind of gauge where the audience is going. And as you do your performance, you start to kind of remember things that work well with the audience and also remember things that don't work well in the audience. Start to gauge your crowd. Start to gauge your audience. Have a think about how the crowd is reacting. If there's a couple of acts before you or a couple of speakers before you, listen to the crowd when that person performs. Don't let the reaction, though, dictate how you're going to perform. In the comedy sphere, there's different types of comedians. In the music sphere, there's different types of music. And in the public speaking sphere, there's different types of personalities. Personality is important when you're connecting to the crowd. I believe you should be genuine. You should be yourself. Don't try to pander to the audience. Just use your ability to engage with them. When connecting with the audience, I tried just to be myself. Because as soon as you start to act in a mathematical way on stage, you start to negate the audience. And if you negate the audience, you can't connect with them. Try to gauge how they're feeling. Is this an easy audience? You're not going to inspire everyone. I mean, you might do. And if you do, that's amazing. But remember, you need to start somewhere and you need to inspire them slowly. Well, let's touch on the psychology of an audience. Now, usually when people are going somewhere to see you perform or speak about something or to do comedy, they're there because they want to be entertained or they want to be inspired. So think about that. How are you going to inspire that person that's in there or that many people that's in there? Just think about the audience. Is this an easy audience? I believe no audiences are easy. But once you get in there and you start to really connect with them, that's when the art form as a stage performer really starts to become fulfilling. If you don't connect, there's nothing wrong with that. Just move on. But if you do connect, the rewards are just amazing. The feeling you get when you actually connect with an audience makes it all worthwhile. One of the best feelings as a comedian is when you have the room laughing at something that you've written. It's the coolest thing ever. One of the best things as a public speaker for me is when someone starts to talk about what you've just spoken about. whether they tweet it, whether they share it on social media, or whether they come up to you and say, hey, what you said there inspired me. I thought it was really cool. And the great thing as a musician is when someone comes up to you after you performed and said, I love your music. Your music inspires me. Remember, the goal is to connect. And the only way to connect is to engage with them. And if you engage with them right, you'll inspire them. And that inspiration will be the lasting effect of your connection. Connecting at a show is great, but connecting after the show through your inspiration is gold dust. So what have we learnt about connecting with the audience? Well, firstly, the audience is the most important entity in the room. Their time is valuable and they're there to be entertained. So it's your job to make sure that they feel welcome, are entertained, and are left inspired. Remember what I said before. You need to connect, engage, and inspire. And that will allow you to have a lasting effect on the people that you're performing in front of. I hope you enjoyed this session of the Stage Presence podcast. I hope you can join us for our next session, which will be focused on the power of developing confidence on stage. Until next time, be good.